business owners likely will have only one shot to sell a business. Most don't understand what drives value and how buyers look at a business. Until now. Welcome to the How to Sell a Business podcast, where every week we talk to the subject matter experts, advisors, and those around the deal table about how to sell at maximum value. Every business will go to sell one day. It's only a matter of when. We're glad you're here. The podcast starts now.
On today's episode, I had the opportunity to interview Mary Mills, and great timing. We're having some turnover, and and it's one of those things of, oh my gosh, as far as what I don't know about the role that I'm trying to fill, and it was just awesome and so fortuitous for me to talk to Mary Mills of Clear Solutions. That's what she does. She is all about documenting procedures and processes. And from a business value standpoint, one of the things I really believe is that a business that has documented processes and you can hand those to a buyer is a more valuable business. And Marie, she hit it out of the park as far as how this process works, why perhaps you shouldn't do it yourself, how your employees might react if you started down that path of documentation, and a whole host of other things. Out of all the niche businesses, I think she's got a great one. And I hope that I shouldn't say I hope, I know that you'll enjoy this conversation I had with Mary Mills of Clear Solutions. I'm your host, Ed Mysogland. On today's podcast, I interview buyers, sellers, deal makers, and other professional advisors about what creates value in a business and how that business is effectively sold at a premium value. On today's show, you have no idea how excited I am to have Marie Mills of Clear Solutions. So, like I said in the introduction, Marie helps businesses clarify, improve, and document processes in plain language so the business can run consistently and efficiently. She's been doing this for over 15 years and has provided this service through her own business, Clear Solutions, for the past 6 years. So, Marie, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Great to be here, Ed.
So I'm in this now with a situation where we have a team member that is leaving, and I'm stuck. I know how to do her job. I have done her job, and I'm the guy, and here I am. How fortuitous that you and I are talking. So I guess the first thing, you have quite a niche, but can you tell a little bit more about Clear Solutions and just the organization, how you work, and where you're working?
Yeah, you bet. So I work with a number of different companies, big, small, different industries. That's not really what industry they work in isn't really not that important. They could be making about $200,000 a year. They could be making over $20 million. All of those have been my clients. They might have 0 employees, and they might have over 150 employees. Okay, so what they all have in common is they have some issues. They have some challenges running their business that has to do with process, that has to do with the lack of clear and efficient process. And that's where I come in, and that's where I help them.
Well, like I was saying, in my situation, I don't want to say I'm stuck, but as a practitioner, I'm sitting here going, all right, this is not that big of a deal. But the more, whether it be preparing for this podcast or all the other things that I have to do today, I'm now focused on, all right, I got to think about this onboarding or hiring and then onboarding this person. And boy, wouldn't it be great if I had, here's kind of the playbook on your position. And I don't know, and I've been doing it for 30 years. And so I guess that's kind of where I want to start is, am I alone?
You are definitely, yeah, right. You're definitely not alone. I mean, I have got a few panic calls from businesses that like, hey, my key person is leaving. They've been here 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, and they just gave 2 weeks notice, and they've always kept things running smoothly. And now they're leaving, and believe it or not, I don't actually know what they do. And that's in addition to I have to hire, I have to onboard,
Yeah.
I have to do all those things. And if you don't have a clear process, yeah, now it's like it's a lot, right? Now you have to think of the process as you need it.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you don't think of it, the process complexity, until you start being empathetic to the next person, and
Yes.
you take for granted all of the experience, all of the reps that you've had, either doing it or overseeing it or whatever role you're playing. Now all of a sudden it's a different animal, where someone coming in cold, they have a working knowledge of the industry, but they have no idea how to work in your environment. So so the, I, so I know there wasn't a question there. I'm crying on your shoulder, really. So one of the things that we talked about, or we wanted to talk about, is the difference between process and procedure.
Yeah.
So what's the difference?
Yeah, that right. Great question. There's a lot of confusion around that, and I like to keep things simple whenever possible to avoid confusion. I think
Yeah.
technically, if you talk to people who are really into process, they'll say, well, a process is more general, it's higher level, and in a big company, it will cross multiple departments, and a procedure is more of the step-by-step instructions. So with
Okay.
the work I do, I think keeping it simple is really the best approach. So I use the terms interchangeably. I'll say process, procedure, and if people talk about their SOPs or their standard operating procedures, I'm like, yeah, it's all the same thing. We're all like, define it. What is it? It's like you're following a series of steps to achieve a desired outcome. And that's so if you weren't following a process or you didn't have a process, you would be working randomly and just kind of doing it however every single time. So the whole point is to have a set series of
Yeah.
steps to that desired outcome.
So I was I was forced to think about how I am going to do this. How am I going to I have options. I could dump it into the other staff members, kind of divide the roles. Um, but you can't grow doing that. And we're always constantly trying to grow our business. And by saying, okay, we have a hole here, we'll just kind of divide roles, because it's the easy way, and they have an understanding of the process. So where I'm heading with this is from a development standpoint, because like I said earlier, if I could just hand somebody, this is the playbook. So how do I do that? Because I was thinking about, all right, here's what I'll do. I'm gonna strap on my dictation machine, and I'm just gonna talk through this, and then I'm going to memorialize it, and I'm going to this is how you do it. I mean, but I suspect that's probably not the way this whole thing goes.
It's not a bad idea of how it goes. I mean, okay, so you start with finding out who understands how the job works, like whatever the individual tasks, like
Yeah.
what's involved. And then for each task, each process, what do you need? What are you trying to do? And how do you do it? And then you need to
Okay.
write it down, because it's not enough just to have it in your head. It doesn't work very well. It's too easy to have misunderstandings. So you write it down. So you could get your dictation machine on and you could speak into it, and then you could have somebody just dictate it word for word. And that would be a good start, right? And that's what I
Okay.
would call the brain dump. That's your initial brain dump. Okay, so
Nice.
first you've identified what it is you're going to document, and then you go to
Right.
each piece and you do the initial brain dump of how it works. Now, the difference between how it's going to come out of your mouth and how easy it is for somebody else to read that and understand it, right? That Okay, that's the next step. You got to organize it. You have to organize it so that you could hand that document to somebody, and with relatively little explanation from you, you want to provide some basic
Right.
context, but relatively little explanation. Now they can read that and understand
Right.
what is it they're trying to do and how did they do it and how do they know that they've done it correctly in the end, right? And so when I work with
Yeah.
companies, I mean that's basically what I'm doing. I'm sitting down and I'm saying, okay, what are the issues you're facing? And okay, so these processes aren't clear. Let's start talking about each process individually,
Okay. Okay.
and then let's get really clear on that until it's done.
Okay. So your role is one of scrutinizing the process, the clarity of the process. Is that a fair statement
Yes,
or
it
no?
is. And it's also capturing it, right? It's capturing it
Okay.
because many businesses do not have, they don't really have the processes written down. Somebody comes in, they're trained, there might be a few notes here and there, but then they're just telling them, it's what I call like the oral tradition, right? You're just passing it
Right.
down through oral
That's
tradition.
it. I'm that
And
guy.
then it's from my head, now it's in your head, and maybe you understood what I said, maybe you didn't, maybe you remembered everything I told you, maybe you didn't, probably you didn't,
Right.
right?
No,
Okay,
I
and so
didn't.
then I'm helping them really capture all the details, and then as we do it, as we're capturing all the details, that initial brain dump, it's like, okay, let's go through and organize this and say where's the sequence, where are the handoffs, who else is involved in this, and how do you go from the beginning to the end, and what's the end, and all that. Yeah. So it's the capturing and the clarifying and the organizing.
I get it. So is it fair, like from who does this? Is it the business owner that documents it, or and oversees it, or do you say, you know what, valued employee, I need your help here. Just in case you get run over by a bus, we need to figure out how to keep going. Is it fair to ask them to help, or
Ab-
to at this initial stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Because they are like the keepers of the knowledge, right? They're the ones that know how this works. Okay, so they're the subject
Yeah.
matter experts. So now you've
Hmm.
identified, which processes you need to write down and who's the subject matter expert. And then you go talk to them
Hmm.
and you could start. It's a great thing to ask your people to write down what they do. And that is, again, a great start. The It will only take you so far because usually the people who are really good at doing the work aren't necessarily really good at writing down what they do, right? So not everybody's a great writer. Not everybody is great at organizing information. And the other thing is it's kind of counterintuitive, but the more you know, the more likely you are to leave a detail out,
A
right?
hundred
Because
percent. I'm
all these assumptions, we're so used to
Yeah.
doing this. Oh yeah, I forgot you wouldn't know that. Oh yeah, I forgot not everybody would know that, right? So then the subject matter expert, absolutely, they could start by writing it down, and then you want somebody who's more objective, who's not actually the expert, to come in and read it and then start saying, well, wait a
Okay.
minute, what did you mean by this? And what does this
I get it.
acronym mean? And then that's how you refine it. It's, yeah.
So
Sometimes it's the
yeah.
owner and
So
sometimes it's the person doing it. It's whoever's doing the
yeah.
most familiar.
You know, I wonder how whether the employee feels threatened when, like for
Yeah.
me, here go, here write the playbook for how you do your job,
Yeah.
just in case,
Just just in case, and get it done within 2 weeks if you don't mind. Yeah, I know.
Right.
No, this
That's
comes
awesome.
up a lot, and so when I work with a company, I usually there's one main point person. It could be the owner or it could be somebody else who's in charge of a
Uh-huh.
division, and I work with them. So they're my primary liaison between me and all the people I'll talk to. And I first want to make sure that everybody understands why we're doing this. And it's not because we're going to then replace you or take away your job. And then when I work with them
Right.
directly, I let them know that. And, it's not just saying, we're doing this because we want to run more efficiently. It's really like showing the advantages of doing it. It's like, this should make your job easier. This
Oh,
will make it easier for somebody to fill in. If you want to go on vacation, this is going to make it easier for you to go on vacation because somebody else is going to know how to fill in
oh,
for you where
sure,
they need to.
sure.
Right.
No, that's a great point.
Yeah. And it also, oftentimes when you get these employees and they've been around for a long time, it's not so much I don't want to say taken for granted, but people just like they're used to that person really handling all this work. And then when you write it
100%.
down, I've had managers and owners just go, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea how valuable this employee is and how much they did." And the
Yeah,
employee will say the same thing. I didn't realize I did so much. So it's really like this, it's
yeah,
like a way of recognizing all their hard work.
yeah. Let's visit at my next review about just how valuable I am.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you prioritize? Where do you start? I
Yeah.
mean, I'm sitting here going, all right, for me, I'm going to say, all right, I start at the money and work backwards. Whatever gets me closest to being able to pay the bills is where I probably should start. So is that right or no?
Yeah. Okay. So, right. So, oftentimes there's many, many processes that need to be documented
Hmm.
and improved. So you can start by looking at what is a priority for the business right now. Now, if you have an employee who just gave 2 weeks notice, and they're a key employee, and there's a lot that employee knows that maybe somebody else doesn't know. All right, that's a priority
Right.
right there. That person's job, and then within that job, to be perfectly honest, 2 weeks is not enough time to document what somebody knows, right?
Yeah.
So you're not
Yeah, I
going to
know.
be able to even capture everything that they know. So then you're going to say, what are those things that are, if you walked away tomorrow and nobody else knew, that could, really cripple a business or at least cause a lot of
Sure.
churn and scrambling to reinvent the wheel, right? Those are the kinds of things. And so I start by try to get an outline of what are the tasks that you do and what are the most important
Hmm.
ones.
I get it.
And if you're not used to documenting processes, I also recommend don't pick the easiest and don't pick the hardest. Pick something in between, right? And
I get it.
start warming up to what this is going to take.
Well, I know a lot of business owners that we're bumping into these days are using Loom, and they just this is a video, and to me, I don't think it's any different than the dictation illustration I used earlier. You still, I mean, you can show me, but somebody's got to document it. Somebody has to, what I thought was super easy, as far as like procedural. It may not be for the next person. You can watch that video over and over and over again
Yeah.
and kind of get the gist, but the finer points, I'm with you. I don't think that's the best way to say it. I don't think that I like Loom. I just don't
Mhm.
think that for an SOP, that it may be great for, here's kind of an example, at a high level of how this works, but as a replacement for my SOP, probably not. You agree?
I agree. I think video has its place, like things that are highly visual, like if you're going through a complicated software procedure,
Oh,
trying to write
uh-huh.
that line by line, that's not easy to follow. But if you have a little video about that, that's good. But yeah, I mean, having context and having the
Hmm.
outline of what you're
Yeah,
doing is most
yeah,
helpful in most
I get it.
cases.
Well, you had talked about capturing and clarifying the process. Can you talk a little bit about like, why that works so well?
Why it's so important to capture and clarify it?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, but I mean, the best part. So the best approach was capturing and clarifying a process is an iterative approach, and I'm
Yes.
just wondering what makes that approach work so well.
Yeah.
Because I'm assuming this is a living document that you're constantly, once you get it down, you're constantly tweaking it and updating it, right?
Yes, right. Yes, that's a really good point. So it's not a one and done. Your documentation, your process documentation is living documentation that needs to be updated as your business changes. And and capturing it initially, I found that an iterative process is really the most efficient way to go because there's usually more to it than you think. When you go into it, you say, oh, I'm going to document this. This is so easy. It's going to take me an hour, and then we'll do a review, and then it'll be done. And the reality is, again, going back to that kind of the curse of excellency or whatever, where, somebody knows it so well, they write it down, they say,
Yeah.
I think this is everything. And then somebody else reads it and go, wait a minute, I don't quite understand this or this. And so the iterative approach is where you start with a brain dump, and then you have somebody else review it and organize it. And then you go back and let's review the draft. Okay, now here's our questions. Now expand on it again. And you just keep doing that. And
Right.
the key point is that you walk away from it for a while because you're going to come back to it with fresh eyes. And that's where
Sure.
the things that don't quite make sense and aren't completely explained, that's where you're going to catch that.
Oh, that's a great point. I guess this is a long-term process, that and for someone like me that is scrambling now, trying to document a 40-year-old business and all the processes that we have implemented over the years, that's a big ask. And for people that are looking at selling their business, something's better than nothing, but at the same time, I don't think that you're going to see the value benefit by just throwing together a Google Doc and thinking that this is my SOP, and oh, by the way, we wrote it a month ago. So and that's kind of my next question is, how, from a value standpoint, and I know this is kind of a loaded question, I know from where I sit that a business is more valuable that has documentable processes. You read it in Michael Gerber's E-Myth. The whole franchise world is they're about that. Let the system be the expert, not the people. I want to ask you about value, but I'm not really certain about how to ask the question, other than you've been to different businesses, you've seen it. Can you tell the difference pre and post implementation of this process? You know what I mean? Because I'm certain you work with them on a long-term basis. Yeah. And I know that was the longest question that you've ever heard, but I was trying, but you know where I'm going with it, right?
Yeah, it's an investment for sure, right? It's an investment, and then how does it pay off? How soon can you get the payoff? So obviously it depends on the situation, but I almost always see a payoff right away, because one of the biggest benefits to doing this is that yes, you have clear documented processes, but you've also had the discussion. It generates a discussion that is so valuable, because people come in and they just do the work. And why do they do that? Well, I've always done it this way. And then when you sit down and say, hey, I really want to make this clear and write this down, it generates a discussion about, why do we do it that way? Why do we do it that way? And I'll tell you a story, true story. Okay, so I was working with a company and I was documenting their receiving processes. And the guys tell me, okay, yeah, this pack comes in, we check it off, take the packing list, and then we walk over to accounting and we put it in their inbox. Oh, what does accounting do with it? Oh, I have no idea. That's just what I was told. All right. So later I go
Yeah.
down to accounting and I said, hey, that packing list that receiving gives you, what do you do with it? And they go, oh, yeah, I put it in the recycle bin. And they said, well, why,
Oh,
okay, why do you think they give it to you? Like, well, I don't know. That's just, they always did. So I just let them do it. And so I said, well, we should talk. And we all got in the room and, kind of talked it out. And we all had a really good
sure.
laugh. But that, it's that kind of thing. That's a small thing, but you take that
Right.
and then you multiply it by all your different processes. Now you've got like
100%.
time wasted, energy wasted. Yeah. So
100%. That's a great example because same kind of thing. I mean, we've been. If you came in our business, you would see the same thing. It was like, well, that's how we do it. What do you mean? Don't ignore the efficiency. This is just how we do it.
this is just
And
the way it is.
well, and the funny thing is, I think, and I know I'm asking you some questions that we didn't really talk about, but like for the older folks, the older sellers, let's take 60 and up. I'm trying to figure out whether this is an easy process to sell them or not. You know what I mean? Because we talk to a lot of business owners that are getting ready to sell, and they're saying, well, hey, what can I do in order to prepare and maximize value? And certainly this is on the list, but at the same time, I'm not certain they buy into it. Maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, the people you work with, based on age, and sorry about I'm kind of in that camp. Based on age, what's the how do you work through that?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's so much about age or if it's just about kind of mindset about how the business runs. But I think one thing I've seen this several times, is that the owner manager says, yeah, this is what my people do. Well, guess what? That's not what their people do. Their people do something else, and they don't know that until it's written down. And so if you're preparing to sell your business, what comes to mind is that, a couple things is you want to know, you want to be informed. You don't want to show up to sell your business and say, oh, by the way, I had no idea that's what we did. Right? That's not going to look good, right? Like
Right.
you want to know how your business is currently running. And my understanding of when you sell a business, isn't there some kind of transition period from the old owner to the new owner and training, right?
There is.
Okay, so
You're right.
what are you going to do? Just field like 100 million phone calls from the new owner?
No,
Or you could have your
that's
processes.
You know what? That's a great example. And to be honest with you, one of the things that why a business owner would want to do this is that it lessens the amount of time they have to work with the buyer post sale, because I mean that could be a 1 to 3 year process. I mean it takes time to transition the business. So having all of this knowledge out of people's heads onto paper, and then it becomes vetting the, clarifying, like you said, clarifying the process. Do you understand how we operate? Then it's a matter of getting out. So if I'm a business owner, I'm like, man, if I could reduce the amount of transition time, this is a really good investment. That's a great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, and I was also going to say that you might meet a business buyer who buys the business, and then they're saying, hey, how does this work? And you say, well, this is how we do it. And they're like, well, why do you do it that way? That doesn't seem to make much sense. And I don't know if you ever get into some debate about that, but if you have a written process, there's a credibility there, right? You have taken the time to write this down and to vet it and to make sure this is a good way of doing the work. Then you have more credibility when you're in that transition phase and less debate.
Well, it's funny you say that because there's some guys that are buying up foundries, and that's their thing, that they are way into process and efficiency and retooling, for lack of a better word, an antiquated industry, and they are just killing it because of that. I mean, there is just an antiquated way of doing things, and you start documenting that one works in one particular business, and you take that playbook and you put it on to the next acquisition. You're miles ahead, and your ROI is happening so much quicker.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that, and I would love to know it, is, and I have no way of quantifying it, is the increase in value. That if there's not really, in valuation, it's more about earnings and risk. And so I'm trying to, when you look at a franchise, all things being equal, I mean, you're buying a process. I have to believe that by doing something like this, you are buying the business owner's process, and that lowers the risk, and that increases your value.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And again, so I'd like to let me talk a little bit more about the explicit benefits, of doing this.
Please.
And so there are a lot of benefits. So I was trying to narrow it down and make it, easy to understand. So the first thing is when you document your processes, when you clarify them, you are creating a shared understanding in the business. So you don't have opposing points of view of what you're doing and how it's supposed to get done, right? You get everybody on the same page, and you create that transparency, right? So like I had said before, so the employees are more aware of what they're doing. The managers are more aware of what the employees are doing. So you have this shared understanding. Right. And so I had this experience working with the business, and their business had to do with event planning. And they had a long-term employee. They had a salesperson, and she was great. And, sales were coming in. There was no reason to question the process. But they wanted this documented because she was leaving the company. And so I went to talk to her and document it. It turns out from the time they got the initial inquiry from a potential customer till when the deal was closed was about 3 months. Okay. And so I wrote this down, got it all organized, reviewed it with the owners, and they, their jaws just dropped. 3 months to close a sale. We want that sale closed in 3 weeks, right?
Sure.
Okay, right. So there you go. So it's like that now you have a shared understanding when it's written down. There's not like an assumption of how it's happening. You have the guidelines written up. This is how we want it to happen. So that's one main benefit. The other we've talked about a little bit, which you're kind of experiencing, is dependence or being overly dependent on a single employee. And that employee has knowledge that nobody else in the business knows. And this is a real risk. And sometimes you can figure out what they know pretty easily, and sometimes you cannot, right? It depends on how complex. And that is a problem. And, my story there is about a company that did a lot of shipping, and then somebody retires. And a few weeks later, the postage machine runs out of postage. And now what do you have? You got 3 guys standing around the postage machine, staring at it, trying to figure out, because nobody knows how to refill the postage machine. Something really simple, right? But often it's much more complicated than that, right? So, you can find that you probably can find that on the internet, but a lot of stuff you can't. Either way, it's a waste of time. It's not a good thing.
100%.
Yeah.
And, and it's like you're in our shop, because just a couple days ago, I was trying to figure out how to print out the year-end postage by person, who
Yep.
spent what, and I'm like, good God, how do you do that? And you're right. I'll bet I can't tell. I can't tell you how much time I spent
Yeah.
monkeying with that silly thing.
Because it's rocket science, right? It's just rocket
Right.
science, right? And this is
Well, it is.
thing is people think, well, it's so simple. I don't have time to write it down, but it's actually, if you don't know it, you don't know it. It takes time to figure it out.
Yeah, and at the same time, I mean, I look at it from, you're talking about employees. I'm looking at business owners too. What do you do? And
Yep.
and we probably shouldn't minimize their role, because a lot of reasons the businesses don't sell is because they believe that the business is the owner. So if
Yep.
you have if you can document the owner's role, this is what I do every single day, or this is there's certain duties that a business owner has on a regular basis. That to me will lessen the potential value penalty that the business owner may incur.
Yeah.
So the the funny thing that, and I can hear the people talking is, if this, these processes are so important to the business, why don't I do this myself? Why? I mean, why don't I take the time? I mean, I know that they're important. So what advice do you have, for those business owners that are listening to this going, you know what, they actually have a point, and they want to dip their toe into this world.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is challenging for businesses to do this completely on their own. And so the first thing I hear, okay, first of all, I hear this from pretty much every client I've ever had. They're like, they show up and they're embarrassed. I should have been able to do this myself. I should have been able to do it myself. It's like, it's very straightforward, but it's not as easy as it looks. And so
Right.
we've talked about, not everybody is process oriented. Not everybody is really good at writing or organizing information. It takes time. People do not like doing it. Number one reason, I hate writing processes, right? I love writing processes. That's why I'm in this business. But most people don't. And you don't know where to start. You don't know where to put it. So guess what? You write a process, you put it out there, you can't find it, you rewrite it. Now you've got multiple versions. Now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
So it's not just the documentation, it's also there has to be a system for managing it. There has to be a system for managing it. Yeah. And it is like, it's like a lot of things. It's so beneficial when you do it. Doesn't make it any easier to do it.
Yeah. So, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I was going to say,
have a
but I
habit
forgot
of-
the advice part. So the advice, what's the advice? The thing is, it's like we talk about it like it's not a one and done. It really needs to be a habit. And it needs to be a habit that's integrated into doing your everyday work. And so if you have each one of your people schedule some time out every single week, and all you get to do during that time is you work on your processes. Even if you don't make really fast headway, you're now creating this habit. And it gets people thinking about not just doing the work, but thinking about the work and starting to write it down.
Yeah, that part's really good. And from the standpoint, if I'm a business owner, I'm sitting here going, how do I do that? When do I call Marie, and am I supposed to do this at myself and start here and then call her, or am I supposed to, do you start and you coach the whole process? How do you work?
Yeah, no, it's great. So I would say if you have any question, like don't hesitate to call, right? Because then, so we'll jump on a discovery call first. And the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the problem you're having really is process related. I actually have had somebody who wanted to hire me, And they're like, yeah, this person is not doing the process. And it's like, well, do you have a process? Yes. Did you train them on it? Yes. They just don't want to do it? Yes. Okay, that's not a process problem. That's a performance problem, right? Okay, so now
Right.
let's clarify that the problem really is
Ah,
that you don't have clear processes, and not that you have them, but people aren't using them. And so when I work with people, I can do all the writing. I can do some
yeah.
of the writing. I can coach you to do the writing. I can coach you through the whole process of writing your processes. So every engagement is customized and it's individual
Sure.
to your budget and to what you need and how willing and ready and interested you are in doing some of the work yourself. And it can vary. It doesn't have to be we decide that at the very beginning. We'll decide like, let's just jump in, document something together. Now you get a sense. You want to write more? Perfect. You don't want to write more? Perfect. I can work with any of that. Yeah.
I got it. So after, and one of the questions we were talking about is how to overcome resistance when someone doesn't want to adopt the new process, because this is the way we've always done it. And I can hear in, aside from just the sheer embarrassment that I've in doing this podcast and telling you all the things that are going wrong in my life. I mean, so I can hear our staff going, well, this is the way we've always done it. So how do we overcome that?
Yeah. Right. Okay. So when there's resistance, the first thing I always say is find out why, because people always do things for a reason, even if they don't think they do. They do it for a reason. Find out why they are resistant. What is behind it? If it is, in fact, it's just we've always done it this way, and I kind of am a lazy person, and I don't really want to change or whatever. All right. So that's one thing, and a way to deal with that is to really you got to get people thinking like this is best for the business, and if it's good for the business, it's going to be good for you ultimately. So it's really
Yeah.
we're not asking you to we never want to ask you to do something just to do it a certain way just because or because that's what I told you to do. There should be a good reason for why the process is being done a certain way. So try to get them on board by showing them that this is in their own benefit. Okay, this is in their own interest to work
Yeah.
efficiently. Now, let's say that's not the reason, but there's some resistance. There's some reason they're not following the process. And I've had this happen. Again, you find out why. So I had a fellow, and he was working in HR, and he was responsible for offboarding and terminating employees when they left the company,
Yep.
terminating their access. And so we had this process to make sure that the access was shut down, and it wasn't happening. And I went back to this guy and I said, are you following the process? And he said, yeah. I said, well, can I watch you? Okay. And then I watched him skip a key step.
Oh,
Okay. So he was shy to admit that he wasn't following it. So I
sure.
got to find out what's that about. And it turned out the way the process was written, he was sending an email to a manager and saying, I need you to tell me what the termination date and day and time is. Okay. Well, the manager and the manager's worldview has better things to do at this time. So he
Sure.
wasn't
Okay.
replying. And this is a cultural issue, right? This is like an internal cultural issue that you have to deal with. You're not going to
Right.
solve it with a process, but you can. So I informed the right people and they can deal with that in their own
Sure.
way. But what I ended up doing is we rewrote the process so that he sends the email to the manager and he says, if I do not hear from you by such and such a date, I will assume the termination date and time is this and this. Now the
I got
responsibility is on the manager, right?
Sure.
And that worked much better with that particular dynamic and that particular culture.
Yeah.
So always find out first why they're resistant to it.
Well, to be honest with you, I would foresee that, or I would assume that there is a certain level of being threatened that someone's going to find out that, you know, that there's greater throughput, greater, I could be doing more,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
you know, and
yeah.
yeah, I could see that. Oh my
Okay,
goodness.
Yeah,
Go
that's
ahead.
more of a performance issue, but
Right.
yeah, and I mean, it is threatening, even when there's nothing bad to discover. It is a little bit unsettling to your employees when
Yeah.
someone comes in. It takes a really confident employee for somebody to come in from the outside and say, "Hey, tell me everything you do. I'm going to write it down." Right? And then we'll all
Yeah.
know that, that you said it and this is the way you work. And I think you just have to be very gentle with people and very supportive and make sure that everybody understands this is for the sake of efficiency and clarity.
Yeah, and I think that you as a business you have to probably have the communication and culture dynamics down, because I was trying to formulate my one of my last questions of from a timing standpoint, you know you can't throwing this on somebody I think puts them in a defensive position, but if you work on the culture and communication and what are some of the problems, here's a solution that we can collectively will benefit all of us if we can document our work, because someone leaves, oh, by the way, Joe, you're the guy that's going to backfill all of the responsibilities that the outgoing employee has. Don't you think?
Yeah, it can. You're right. It can happen. I mean, I think that you just have to be very transparent as to the reasons of why
Yeah,
you're doing this, right? And to really
I get it.
help the employee know. And I had a brilliant thought there. It flew away out of my head, and maybe it'll come back, but
Yeah,
but
no,
maybe not.
no.
Yeah.
Well,
I know what I was. Okay, I know what I was going to say.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it does help. It does help. This is another reason why you might want to bring in somebody from the outside. I have worked
I
with
get it.
dynamics where the manager employee dynamic is not good. And you know what? The manager will say, I need to know what this person does, and I don't want to ask. It's not going to go well if I ask. They may not even tell me the whole thing.
Sure.
I want you to ask. Now, the employee knows that I've been hired by the
Yeah,
manager or by the owner. But if I approach it neutrally, which I'm always going to, because my job is to show up and to understand, it's not to judge, right? That's not
sure.
going to happen when I'm working there. Okay, now employees are much more willing and able to open up and talk to me because I am a neutral
Got it.
person and I am an interested person and I'm not going to judge them.
I get it. Well, I appreciate you going a little over talking to me. And at the end of every episode, I always ask, what's the one piece of advice that you could give listeners that would have the greatest impact on their business? For you, what would that be?
Well, I would say don't wait for your employees to give 2 weeks notice. Start now. Start next week.
You
Don't
had to
wait.
jam,
Don't wait.
yeah, you had to jam that to me, didn't you?
It is, I know you don't want to hear it. That is the thing though. Yeah. Don't wait.
Okay. So, where can we find you? And you do work all across the country, right?
I work all across the country. I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I do all my work on Zoom. I do not need to be
Okay.
on site. I have a
Nice.
process that works virtually. Yeah.
Nice. So, what's the best way we can connect with you?
So I have a website, clearsolutionsbymarie.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I would love to link in with anybody who wants to link in.
Well, we will have every way that someone can possibly get in touch with you in the show notes on the website and on your favorite podcast player. So, Marie, I gotta tell you, there's different businesses that you see that are niched, and I gotta tell you, you have one fascinating business. And to be honest with you, I wish I would have known you so much sooner than now. So I appreciate your time. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah. Me too. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you for joining us today on the How to Sell Your Business podcast. If you want more episodes packed with strategies to help sell your business for the maximum value, visit howtosellabusinesspodcast.com for tips and best practices to make your exit life-changing. Better yet, subscribe now so you never miss future episodes. This program is copyrighted by Myso Inc. All rights reserved.